Gale-force winds buffeted Sydney's coast this morning, making it a rough ride for commuters aboard Manly's ferry. The winds were so strong, waterfalls seemed to run in reverse. It wasn't long before the Central Coast got caught up in the wild weather. This Tumby-Yumby house partially destroyed when it was hit by a gum tree. The storm is due to hit the Hunter sometime tonight.
The Hunter region is going to get strong winds, particularly this afternoon and tonight, gusting up to 90 to 100 kilometres an hour.
The forecast has prompted grave concern in the already suffering region.
It just puts all that strain back on the system again, and I hope that we just don't get those winds.
In Newcastle, state emergency service teams are preparing for the worst.
Between us and Lake Macquarie, we'd have well over 50 teams, and they can be deployed to any trouble spot at a moment's notice.
Learning from last week's experience, emergency services are advising people to stay inside their home and watch their property for signs of erosion. Meanwhile, garbage trucks have been dispatched from Sydney to help clear Hunter streets of debris from last week's storm. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
On first appearances, the ground at Cessnock didn't seem too bad, and all things considered, it could have been a whole lot worse. If either side was having trouble with the temperature, the heat in defence was enough to warm the coldest of souls. While the Bulldogs' bark wasn't always as bad as their bite, they sunk their teeth in when they could. But it was Cessnock which had stamped its authority by half-time, opening an 18-4 lead. After a grinding first 40 minutes, the second half kicked off with a real highlight. After evading a number of Curry defenders, Kiwi Daniel Metcalf showed great speed in the heavy going to outpace the cover in a wonderful solo effort by the back rower. The 40 points to 4 win helping the all-important for and against in a tight race for the top 5. Last night it was the Scorpions playing the Butcher Boys on a field that was raining cats and dogs. Most grounds hadn't even dried out from last weekend's rain when down it came again as players copped it on all fronts. The first try came from a kick that had everyone confused as rain and dim lighting made it a job just to stay on the action. Central fought hard though and actually led by 8 points at one stage before Macquarie stormed home to win 32-24.
Last weekend, big seas wreaked havoc on the Central Coast and in the Hunter. Now king tides are eating away backyards on the northern beaches of Sydney. As sand replaces grass, residents say they haven't seen it this bad in 30 years.
And when the council dredged it up the other end, they put a mountain of sand out here that was a good 5 or 6 metres wide, and that's all washed away in the last week.
The news was much better in the Hunter, with the return of wild weather causing relatively few problems. Since last night, the Newcastle SES reported 12 call-outs, while Lake Macquarie received 20 requests for assistance. Considering the strength of overnight winds, volunteers say we were very lucky.
Pretty quiet last night, but we've still got a long way to go. All up, we're still left with about 750 jobs to do. We started with 2,500, so we're not going too bad.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
As far as football goes, the week could have been better for state-ranked Danny Badeiras, but he was happiest back among clubmates today.
It's always in the back of your mind Wednesday, but you've got to put that behind you, otherwise, you're going to suffer a bit. But, like I said, amongst the boys here, they're really keen for a game, and it's rubbing off with me.
Tomorrow night's 200-match milestone will be something to savour as well. A teenage kid from Taree when he joined Newcastle in the mid-1990s, Badeiras debuted briefly in '97 before making his mark the following season. Since then, he's become one of the best hookers of the modern era as a one-team man.
The honour of running out here each week in front of this crowd, I've never been more proud. Just sitting last week, for instance, everyone was under the pump with the flood and that, and we had still 15,000 here. So, it says something about our supporters.
In a strong Newcastle lineup, all 4 Knights who played in Origin 1 are back for the game. Flying out to Istanbul midweek for medical checks, most thought Nicky Carl was linking with a club in that city, but instead it's the Turkish capital, Ankara, where Carl will be based. It follows a deal made overnight for his transfer to Canklerbeleci Sporting Club. Carl will return to Newcastle in the next 48 hours ahead of Asian Cup commitments before linking full-time with his new team. Meanwhile, just one game was played today in the NBN State League with Western hosting Broadmeadow, and it was the visitors who scored first care of a composed Glenn Cooper. It looked more like league a little later when Tim Pratt held back Ibrahim Kodari. It gave Peter Haynes a shot from the spot which didn't come off. Western had its chances too, but it remained 1-0.
Since opening last week, the Recovery Centre on Hunter Street has welcomed a steady stream of people. Representatives from various organisations such as the housing industry, NRMA and the Salvos on hand with plenty of advice. Now one-stop shop recovery teams are canvassing the region to raise further awareness.
To find those people who may not be able to come into the centre themselves, and also to spread the awareness about the centre and what it does.
Today, representatives from the Red Cross, Samaritans and Centrelink were going door to door in Broadmeadow, one of the worst affected suburbs. The recovery teams also offer health advice about the best way to clean up as the community fights to get back on its feet.
If people aren't home, then they'll pass the packs on to their neighbours, telling us about people who are worse affected than they are so that we can go and visit them. So the response all over has been great.
Meanwhile, the Newcastle Law Society is reminding the community about its free hotline for victims of the storm. Homeowners and affected business owners can call for a range of advice.
Any point of clarification, any dispute that you are having with an insurance company, any concerns you might have about a conveyancing transaction.
The Law Society is also organising a community forum with a date and venue to be confirmed by early next week.
To answer questions, to provide information and hopefully put people at ease.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Islington Public's population tripled when the kids from Hamilton North turned up for class this morning. For them, it might as well have been the first day at school with new buildings and faces and a new place to play hopscotch. Yet this move was all about getting back to routine.
children lost time out of school, changes of routine. It's something that the department are very, very strong on, and that is getting children back into classes with their teachers and learning again.
Never mind the learning, there was catching up to be done.
Because I haven't been able to call my friends, and so I'd like to see them.
Parents were given the grand tour of the tiny school with 2 demountables due at the end of the week. With its special needs facilities, Islington was seen as the perfect fit, with the idea to run 2 schools on the one site.
We're looking at having staggered starting times. We're also having staggered lunch and recess breaks for the time being.
There are, of course, teething problems, and getting the extra children in and out of Islington Public is the biggest. At the moment, a free bus will run between here and Hamilton North, while the RTA is working on a drop-and-go system for parents.
We're used to being able to park our cars and pick up our children and giving them a cuddle and a kiss before we get into the car, and now it's not going to happen, so that's a very, very big learning curve.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
Day 11 of the Pasha Bulkers stay on Nobby's Beach, and the salvage operation continues to take shape. A 64-metre tug normally used on the Barrier Reef and in Torres Strait is on its way to Newcastle.
The Pacific Responder has been released by the Australian Maritime Safety Authority to come down from Cairns to be the vessel that will lay the anchors as part of the salvage operation.
Despite speculation in Sydney media, Newcastle Port Corporation denied an attempt to move the vessel took place yesterday, with the real attempt still planned for the end of the month.
It's wrong. We've been very available to outline what's going to happen. We've given a commitment to talk about that. We clearly want this to be safely done. That involves connecting with the community.
That community continues to flock to Nobby's despite miserable weather. While it's good news for some businesses, police and residents are becoming increasingly annoyed with the constant flow of traffic.
What we've been saying to people is that if you're going to come down and have a look at the ship, then people need to be sensible about it, check with the local authorities, understand what's going on down here.
Hunter Tourism says it won't refer to the ship as a tourist attraction and isn't looking to profit from the violent storms. The flow-on effect from the natural disaster is taking a toll in the Hunter, especially in wine country.
We've had hundreds, if not thousands, of cancellations on bookings in the last week, and one of the messages we're trying to get out there is that the Hunter Valley is very much open for business.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Been biding my time in Premier League and trying to find some form and find some energy in that, and I get an opportunity to play in first grade again this week.
The first day of life without Nick Carl for the Newcastle Jets, but in truth, Gary Van Egmond has been planning for it for some time. While admitting the A-League Player of the Year will be tough to replace, the coach is banking on his 3 South American imports to add plenty of depth.
Livio Prieto is coming over. He comes with good pedigree. Jorge Dravinda is another player who comes over, both Argentinian players. And we've also got another player called Flavio Barros, who should be on our shores within the week.
But Carl's departure also opens up more opportunity for current Jets, like Olyroos striker Mark Bridge, who could be fashioned in a Carl-like role, while Joe Wheelhouse is also right in the frame as he comes back from injury, as does rising star Troy Hearfield. They'll get their first opportunity on Wednesday night when the Jets take on Newcastle's Azuri FC in the first of several matches against NBN State League teams.
It helps us to forge a relationship with some of these clubs within the Northern New South Wales Soccer Federation, and B, it's good for us to get our shape.
Meanwhile, Carl will only be back in Newcastle long enough to be farewelled by the club's fans on Wednesday before flying out with the Socceroos the following day for Singapore and the Asian Cup. Jim Callanan, NBN News. While full of praise for staff at Sydney's Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, there's no place like home, and Alan Robinson will be sticking close to his for a while yet. Set to wear that neck brace for at least 3 months, he'll constantly monitor his recovery, but confirmed his riding career will be over if the injury doesn't fully repair.
If it heals 90%, I won't ride again. Simple. I'm not going to risk my life to go back and do it.
Severely concussed by the fall at Canterbury last Wednesday, it's a fractured vertebrae that's causing all the concern. However, it was that spell in hospital where doctors discovered Robinson had actually been riding with similar neck problems for some time and was only a whisker away from permanent damage.
Very close. I couldn't walk again, they said, and maybe not even move my arms.
At 40 and with his career very much on the line, there's something the larrikin hoop hasn't lost, his sense of humour.
I was just coming good, and a Group 1 and Melbourne Cup and Golden Slippers were just around the corner for me.
He and his jokes will remain housebound for a while yet.
Last night's steady rain resulted in minor flash flooding and road closures across the region. And if that's not enough, it seems Newcastle and Lake Macquarie are in for even more wild weather.
By this evening, we're going to see winds at 40 to 55 knots, so that's up to about 110 kilometres per hour. There could be gusts exceeding 120 kilometres per hour. This will cause beach erosion, inundation, and of course we should see some damage from those winds.
Additional state emergency service crews have been brought in from Canberra, across New South Wales and even South Australia to help deal with the damage caused by the long weekend storm and the potential problems tonight's storm force winds could create in Newcastle and Lake Macquarie.
If it does strike our area, we're going to have a lot of trouble with more trees that are going to come down because there's a lot of loose ones out there at the moment.
When trees come down, properties are damaged, roads are blocked, and another big concern we've got is the work that we've already done with the tarpaulins that have already been placed on premises, that they could also become loose.
Anyone who experiences weather-related problems can contact the SES on 132 500.
According to the politicians, it's a billion-dollar bonanza, but to the cynics, it's all about buying votes. Whichever way you look at it, the Hunter will benefit from the state budget, including a 35% increase in capital works spending. The business chamber's mostly happy, but says there's no payroll tax relief, no mention of the Lower Hunter regional strategy, while funding for the F3 to Branxton link is inadequate.
$20 million doesn't go far enough by a long way in terms of addressing some of the state government contribution to that.
Health receives a major boost, $1.13 billion for the Area Health Service. Among the big ticket items, $2 million for a mental health unit, a $2.5 million upgrade to Belmont Hospital and improvements to the John Hunter worth $4.5 million. On the roads, there's $16 million to replace the Turl Street Bridge at Mayfield West and $78 million to continue the Karua to Bulladila upgrade. There's also $38 million for public housing and $155 million funnelled into water utilities. It was obvious there was dissatisfaction with the Labor Party at the state election, and it seems we're now benefiting from the voter backlash.
Clearly, the government's taken note of what's happened here in the Hunter. It's a far improved budget from what we've seen previously in respect of the Hunter.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Just when we thought it was safe to go back in the water, Mother Nature rears its ugly head. Despite predicted storm conditions, the 22-member salvage crew will stay on board the Pasha Bulka overnight.
Salvage activities on board have ceased. They are battening down the hatches. They are bringing more water ballast on board to hold the vessel even more firmly on the bottom.
Early this afternoon, several of the 69 ships waiting off Newcastle had moved away from the coast, the Pasha Bulka acting as the perfect deterrent.
All the master needs to do is to look at Nobby's Beach if they're unsure about what action they should take.
Some in the Hunter have called for visitors to the ship to make a donation to local charities, but Council says that's not the priority.
At the end of the day, this is not about raising revenue, it's about getting the ship off one of our very important beaches.
While the bulk carrier's crew didn't choose to end up at Nobby's, former Lady Mayoress Margaret McNaughton was more than happy to pose there for the cover of the White Pages.
They wanted an icon for the Hunter and they wanted somewhere on the foreshore, and they had a look and suggested that that would probably be the best thing.
The well-known and beloved community volunteer pictured with her famous piano accordion.
It lives in the boot because it's always ready in case somebody needs a sing-along.
Newcastle Council has so far collected 3,000 tonnes of debris and green waste, recycling what it can. At Blackbutt Reserve, machines have started to turn 5 massive piles of fallen trees into mulch and wood chips, which will be used to regenerate gardens washed away by the stormwater. The repair bill for council assets is mounting, the most expensive $200,000 for Blackbutt's enclosures and $125,000 for structural repairs to the Merriweather Ocean Baths and Surf Club, both of which were today cut off by a landslip. Only 10% of roads have been assessed, $900,000 damage already found. Council expects it could take nearly 2 years to clean up the damage done by the storm to public infrastructure. Already, for what's been assessed, the damage bill is mounting towards $11.5 million. But Council fears that figure could nearly double, with many roads, creeks and city-owned buildings still yet to be assessed, and gale force winds predicted over the next 24 hours tipped to wreak havoc on already storm-damaged infrastructure.
There are a lot of trees that are in wet, soggy ground, and a wind of that magnitude will blow them over.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
As the team took a dip after a hard night's work, the club took another chunk out of the Dragons with the signing of promising forward Chris Houston.
With the players that are here and the players that are leaving from up there, I just thought there might be more opportunity for me to be playing first grade.
He's tall and he's got good skills and he's getting a taste of first grade, which we didn't think probably would happen this year, but that's a bonus for us for next season.
It's this season the current players are worried about, with the captain inspiring last night's win. Celebrating 200 games, Denny Badiris was in everything, while Jared Mullen's boot exposed the Raiders on a night no one wanted to be caught short. Luke Walsh had a fair night out too, involved in a number of successful attacking raids, including Adam McDougall's second 4-pointer. By the time Chris Bailey carried over 3 Raiders, the Knights are up 22-6. The fact they only won by 4, the only downer.
A little bit disappointing that where they got those couple of tries at the end, but it's good to get away with the points.
A hamstring injury remains the immediate issue for Josh Perry, while others will remain on ice for a few days yet as everyone simply plans ahead.
It's a big week for us next week. We've got Gold Coast and, back-to-back wins. I don't think we've had that for a while now, so that'd be nice.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. If emotion was the currency used to make career decisions, then Nick Carl wouldn't be going anywhere. He loves Newcastle and the fans adore him, and many did their best to talk him out of leaving today. But it's the reality faced by the modern-day player. What's more, it's the dream to play professionally overseas, and Carl's Turkish move is the first step on what he hopes is a long European odyssey.
If there was any choice, if I could further my career here a lot more, I would, but at the end of the day, I have to do what's best for me and my family.
No one could question his commitment. His day began training with his Jets teammates for one last time. Soon he'll be rubbing shoulders with some of the biggest names in world football.
They have Lugano over there, he's a Uruguayan captain. They've just signed Roberto Carlos. Fenerbahce have signed Roberto Carlos. And I heard whispers that Ronaldo has just agreed to terms with Fenerbahce.
That's not Carl's new club. He's still trying to work out just how to pronounce the Ankara-based team's name himself.
It's such a difficult one, I'm going to have to keep practising or else I'm going to get myself in trouble when I get back there. But at the moment, I'm struggling.
First off for Carl is the Asian Cup with the Socceroos. Then it's all aboard the Ankara Express. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
At the height of the long weekend storm, the wind peeled the roof off this rental unit at Mayfield. The rain then caused the ceiling to cave in. Its occupant, who was home at the time, managed to escape with few possessions into the flooded street below. Sadly, like many renters, this woman was uninsured and has nowhere to go. She, along with hundreds of tenants who are living in storm-damaged properties, are now living in temporary emergency housing.
Unfortunately for her, that the property won't be able to be used for probably up to 3 months. So I would think that she would have to look for new accommodation.
While homeowners are in salvage mode, for most tenants it's more a case of clean out than clean up. From Maitland to Merriweather, around 160 rental properties, including this home at Hamilton where the watermark is still evident, are now uninhabitable. Hundreds more properties were severely damaged. The search for new homes by displaced tenants is expected to put immense pressure on an already struggling rental market. It's estimated it could take around 12 months for demand to meet supply, and as it does, rental prices are tipped to skyrocket.
A lot of the properties will have new carpet, new paint, and therefore the quality of the properties will improve. But there is obviously the possibility that the rents may increase. I would hope no more than 10%, but it's a supply and demand situation.
As for home buyers, real estate agents say they don't think the storm will deter people from buying or devalue homes in the hardest hit suburbs. Christy Carter, NBN News.
At the time of the floods, the people of the Hunter were hardly rejoicing. But for all the destruction, the clouds had a silver lining for residents of the Lower Hunter, with every storage facility now at 100% capacity.
Grahamstown Dam is 700 millimetres more than the old top water level. It's never held more water.
For now, Hunter Water's supply to the Central Coast has been shut down, with both regions receiving plenty of H2O.
When the storm really hit us and we had major power outages on the western side of the lake, the Central Coast supplied water to us in our hour of need.
During the flood response, extra crews and equipment was sourced from interstate to help restore water supplies and sewerage treatment facilities.
Within a short number of days, we're back on track. But we'll have a hard look at this in terms of our crisis and emergency management, and where we can make improvements, we definitely will.
Meanwhile, on Nobby's Beach, last night's predicted wild weather failed to eventuate, sparing the Pasha Bulka and her salvage crew.
They've had a pretty good night and they're very confident that the vessel is in good shape.
Newcastle Port Corporation once again forced to quash speculation about the health of the bulk carrier.
And it clearly was not going to break up overnight. That was wrong.
While the vessel was unaffected, powerful waves lashed the entrance to the harbour, temporarily shutting down the port. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
It was a horrific and incomprehensible few seconds that claimed a life and changed several others forever. 50-year-old Rosemary Flood was behind the wheel of a Ford Laser that reversed up a gutter and zigzagged down the footpath of Raymond Terrace's main retail strip in September 2006. Before coming to rest against a parked Camry, her car bounced off a shop front, hit a woman pushing a pram and a 67-year-old man who couldn't get out of the way in time. Jessica Rees had surgery on her injuries. Tragically, Terence Landers died as a result of his. Today in Newcastle local court, Rosemary Flood was committed to stand trial over the accident. Documents tendered previously said she had little to no recollection of the period from when the car mounted the gutter until the time it stopped. But a statement from Senior Constable Peter Harmon of Newcastle Police said she'd had a minimum 5 seconds to react to circumstances and take some action to stop her vehicle, which had been travelling at speeds up to 28 kilometres per hour. 3 negligent driving charges relating to the event will be taken into account during her trial for dangerous driving occasioning death and grievous bodily harm. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Last night's Newcastle City Council meeting certainly didn't go according to plan. Councillors not only refused to adopt next year's financial budget, but also made no decision regarding a proposed 9.95% rate hike.
Councillors have only spent 2 hours together as a group leading up to this $170 million budget. Now, I don't think that's good enough, and my colleagues don't either.
Councillor Aaron Buman says information relating to a Hunter Business Chamber report on the budget, as well as residents' responses to the rate increase, were practically hidden from council by its staff until late yesterday.
I think councillors were quite disgusted in the fact that information had been withheld, really, and that we've been treated with a bit of contempt.
Meanwhile, resident action groups say rather than a rate hike, council should be looking at cutting staff numbers and pay packets to increase revenue.
We think the savings can be considerable, in the order of millions of dollars. There is no case, we say, for a rate increase, and in fact there could well be a case for a rate reduction.
Councillors will be further briefed on the budget and proposed tax hike tomorrow night and are expected to make their decision next Tuesday. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
He's got a few little aches and pains, and he just it's just all caught up. And at the end of the day, Paul thought that it's best if he tells us now.
Paul Ocon joined his Jets teammates at pre-season training last week, but the signs were there that this preparation was going to be harder than most. No stranger to injury, Ocon's long and distinguished playing career has been affected by more than his fair share, and today it was made official that his playing days are over.
He was one of the players, one of the first players to really go overseas and make a name for himself, and from that alone, he gains a respect from all of us. And like I said, we were back home, wishing that we were the next person to make that move overseas.
The Socceroo keeper flew into Newcastle late today on something of a whirlwind promotional tour before leaving on Thursday for the Asian Cup with his Socceroo teammates, including the now former Jet Nicky Carl.
We have to show the public, not only the Australian public, but the public around Asia, that we are a good side and we're rightfully number one in Asia.
He had a heap to contend with in Newcastle this evening, but they were more interested in his book that he co-wrote for children. Inspired by his own experiences and those of friends and family, the book tells a tale of football-loving kids who find the game a lot different when they move to a new country.
I've had parents come to us and said that their children don't like to read, but have picked up the book and have read it from cover to cover with enthusiasm that they've never seen before.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
He's one of the young players who's obviously going to give a lot to this club over the next couple of years, so hopefully he can get himself right and be back sooner rather than later.
just having the weekend off and getting the body right, I feel fresh as days and ready to take it out the nights.
You don't have to look far to see what effect all this wet weather has been having on sporting fields in the region. Damage to fields and facilities is one concern, but another priority is health and safety issues that have arisen along with floodwaters.
They have to remain closed at this stage because we're still assessing them. With the ongoing weather, there's every forecast, there's every likelihood we'll need to keep them closed because of public safety.
Neighbouring Lake Macquarie Council are treating their fields on a case-by-case scenario, but already many of their fields are deemed unusable this weekend. At Maitland, all their fields remain closed until further notice. It's certainly affecting the region's major sporting competitions, with Newcastle Rugby League close to calling off this weekend's round today, but has deferred its decision until tomorrow. So too will the Newcastle and Hunter Rugby Union, which is desperate to play as it faces a second straight weekend of cancellations. While in the NBN State Football League, all but one match was washed out last weekend and the coming round is also under a cloud. The Newcastle Jockey Club will inspect its Broadmeadow track again tomorrow, but it's still rated unsuitable for racing, having been drenched by some 585 millimetres of rain since June 7.
A special service is being held here tonight for the community in the wake of the devastating storms which lashed the Hunter and Central Coast over the long weekend. It's been an extremely emotional service in which community members have gathered to thank volunteers like the SES and all of those other unsung heroes who put their lives on the line to help others. Special prayers are being offered and 9 candles, that's one for each person who died during the storm and subsequent flood, have been lit. One of the things that's really been highlighted in the service is the sense of community spirit that's emerged across the region during what's been the worst natural disaster to strike the area since the Newcastle earthquake.
"13 days after the Hunter River broke its banks, much of Singleton's rural landscape remains underwater. They'd prayed for rain, but a flood wasn't what the Hunter Valley's drought-stricken farmers expected or were prepared for. Today they made it clear they didn't blame Mother Nature. Instead, farmers are pointing the finger at an inadequate internet-based flood warning system, which they say was inaccessible to most and didn't give them enough time to prepare for the rising water.
It would have alleviated a lot of the damage and a lot of stock losses because people would have been warned in adequate time to get their cattle out onto higher ground. instead of with just a few hours.
That's really caught a lot of people by surprise, and to a certain extent, I suppose, without the, in some of the country, the catchment area not having a great ground cover on it, it actually, the water got moving a bit quicker.
Already, more than 100 rural landholders have applied for one-off government grants of $15,000, while the clean-up and repair of damaged properties and crops will stretch on for months. Jock Laurie says the flood could bring some long-term benefits for growers.
A dry week or two, you'll really start to see the benefit from the rain that was there, even though it has left an awful amount of damage in the flood area.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
The Pine Wave left Newcastle Harbour today with a load of coal for Japan, slipping past the forlorn-looking Pasha Bulker still stranded on Nobby's Beach. But on the horizon, a glimmer of hope in the form of the Pacific Responder. The 64-metre-long vessel arrived today from North Queensland, where it's normally on standby to respond to major emergencies on the Great Barrier Reef. But for the next few weeks at least, it'll call Newcastle home. Its role is to sink giant anchors out to sea off the beach and run cables from the anchors to the Pasha Bulker. The Pasha will then use its own winches to pull, while 3 other tugs assist in the hope of dragging her off the sand. An attempt is expected in the next 10 days. Meantime, further up the harbour, the $10 million trimaran that'll be used for an around-the-world speed sailing record was launched today. French skipper Thomas Caville stood proudly on the deck as it was lowered into the water. Built by Boat Speed on the Central Coast, the 32-metre-long craft should be capable of speeds of around 80 kilometres an hour. Caville hopes to beat Dame Ellen MacArthur's record of 71 days, 14 hours. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
The damage caused by the long weekend's devastating storm is slowly but surely being cut down to size. Around 50 SES crews from across Lake Macquarie and Newcastle are still working day and night to finish the outstanding jobs, but say for the first time there's an end in sight.
It's day 14 today and it's been all go, and then it's a clean up and restock and wash the trucks and get ready for the next one.
With all emergency jobs complete, crews are now focusing on clearing dangerous trees from around homes.
We should be able to handle those if the weather's kind to us and knock those over, hopefully by perhaps Saturday or the end of the weekend.
Meanwhile, Newcastle City Council says while it has allocated money in its next financial budget for the maintenance of drains, it has no plans to modify the region's drainage system.
But those drains are of a finite size now, and to expand them, if it were possible, is very expensive. Lowering them is not really an option because the water's got to drain away. If there's room to widen them, that's something that could be looked at if the money can be found.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Retirement never comes easy for any athlete, and like many before him, Paul Ocon's body made the ultimate decision for him. Ironically, he defied medical opinion for the last decade to keep playing at the highest levels, thanks to a strict regime he implemented after suffering a major knee injury. But now the time has come.
The work that I have to do myself above the work that you have to do with the team, is massive, and unfortunately at the age of 35, mentally I wasn't prepared to do that anymore.
His immediate future will be spent relaxing with family, but both Ocon and the club are keen to see him remain involved with the Jets, while longer-term goals include coaching.
In the future, when, I don't know, but I do definitely have ambitions to coach, and I hope to be successful at it.
Newcastle was grateful that Ocon made his decision now, as to give them more time to search for a replacement, but that's no easy job given his level of experience. That's a commodity the club is now much lighter on when coupled with the losses of Carl and Coveney from last year's squad, with the captain's armband also up for grabs.
People like Joel Griffiths and Jade North, who've had experience at international level, Kovic, these younger players are going to be looking for some real leadership.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. John, never good to lose your captain this close to a game.
Oh no, it's not the perfect scenario, Jim. We're still hoping Jane might be available, but at this stage, 90% not likely, so yeah, just a bit of a nuisance for us.
Who's the likely captain in her absence?
Well, Emma Costa and Narelle Efe are our vice-captain, so it'll come from between one of those two. I think they'll probably share the duties tomorrow.
What about your line-up? How much does this affect your starting team?
Oh, it unbalances a little bit because Jane's been a starter in that position for most of the last 2 seasons, so we'll have to make 2 or 3 adjustments for the one spot, so yeah, it just makes it a little bit harder to deal with.
Now, you only sit 2 points out of the 4, but the semi-finals are approaching pretty quickly. In terms of those aspirations, where do you rate this game? It does seem to be a must-win.
Oh, yeah, certainly. We've only 5 games to go, and we must win this game to give ourselves a chance. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult from here.
As if the storm wasn't bad enough, these Cardiff residents now face a whole new danger. The banks of Winding Creek, which adjoin their properties, are steadily eroding.
That there is actually my backyard, and as you can see, if you can get underneath there, that's actually my pool that's just hanging there.
Every time it rains, more land is lost, and it seems no one is either willing to do anything about it or try to stop the problem, nor is there any sign of the 13 cars which were swept into the creek during the long weekend storm being removed. Residents say Hunter Water and Lake Macquarie City Council are more interested in fighting over who owns the land than helping them.
We ring the water board. The water board come out and say, no, we don't own it. Council own it. You ring up the council, it's like, we don't own it, the water board do.
A meeting between the organisations is planned sometime in the next 2 weeks to try and work out who's responsible for the land. But in the meantime, residents will just have to pray it doesn't rain. In addition to dealing with disappearing backyards, Boston Close's residents are still struggling to clear out their homes and deal with the damage caused by the flood. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
It's a home away from home, a warmer motel room, beds and a few salvaged possessions. Janine Zulian and her 2 daughters are just happy to have a roof over their heads after their Hamilton house was almost completely destroyed.
It's hard, but it's felt like a bit of a little holiday, I suppose, for them. But it's going back to the house each day and having to go through and throw everything out that's been hard for all of us, really.
It's the same story across much of Newcastle. Most hotels are bursting at the seams with those forced out of their homes.
On the Friday, we had people arriving and we had no accommodation because we had a full house, and we finished up putting stretcher beds in their dining room for them.
And while some must turn people away as they're fully occupied, other motels can't open their doors due to the flood damage. Along with the $1,000 federal government payment, those who have been displaced may be entitled to rental assistance from Centrelink and insurers, depending on their situation. And some words of advice from the Master Builders Association for those returning home for the clean-up effort. They suggest not to switch on lights or use power if your house has been flooded, and do not use electrical items which may have been wet or submerged. They must be tested by an authorised repairer or licensed electrician. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It was an early start on the docks for the crew of the Pacific Responder. They spent the morning preparing these huge anchors, each weighing 15 tonnes. In the coming days, the 64-metre-long tug will be used to set those anchors in the sand 400 metres out to sea off the Pasha Bulka.
Wire cables running from the anchors will be fed to the ship, enabling the winches on board the ship to assist with refloating itself.
At the same time, 4 tugs, including the Woona from Sydney and the Kira from Melbourne, will pull in a bid to dislodge the ship from its sandy resting place. Crowds continue to gather at Nobby's to get a glimpse of the ship, which is now leaving its mark in Newcastle's cultural history. Sue Linton was putting brush to canvas in today's sunshine, while Mango from Stockton was reciting Pasha-inspired poetry.
I will sit here and watch, and what will be, but this is the fight of puny men against the raging might of the sea.
We are on target to carry out the refloat attempt at the end of the month when the peak tides arrive.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It's crazy. It's a crazy slab. It's you just got to pick them, you know.
Adam Woolnough was never prepared to give away his spot, and any plans to take a breather have been put on ice. The rugged prop ran for the first time today since aggravating a knee injury on Monday, and he'll take his chances against the Titans tomorrow night.
I think there's always a risk going into a game with an injury. I think it's more of a calculated risk today, but that I'm going to get through. It was a short turnaround and I've pulled up okay.
There were lots of high balls at training this morning with the idea to pepper Preston Campbell.
We'll be testing Preston out with a few bombs if he does play. You know, that's not the strong suit in his game, but he's going to be testing us out as well with his carries and his support play. So.
Like the Knights, the Titans are chasing back-to-back wins. For and against is all that separates the sides, but given the match is on the Gold Coast, the league newcomers have attracted favouritism.
They're definitely a force at home. It must be a little bit intimidating going up there for new teams that haven't been there and players that haven't played there before. So, no, we're just going to treat it like any away game.
Adam McIlrick, NBN News. This trip to Singapore for A-League players is just reward for a job well done in the domestic competition, but they are of the opinion that the best is yet to come.
They reckon the first 2 weeks is going to be very difficult, you know, but you got to expect that you got to put the hard work to get the rewards at the end of it, so I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Nick Carl's call up to the Socceroos squad follows a stunning season with the Newcastle Jets and precedes a move to his new Turkish club in Ankara.
It's a matter of getting there, trying to establish myself and see if I can make a move elsewhere from there, but it'd always help with the national team if I am playing regular over there.
And over there, this is the calibre of footballer Nick Carl will be playing against. Roberto Carlos's arrival from Real Madrid is every bit the Turkish delight for Fenerbahce fans. The brilliant Brazilian left wing-back is among football's living legends, hence the reception. Locally, all NBN State League games are going ahead this weekend, with Phoenix moving its game from number 1 to the Newcastle Athletics field. Newcastle and Hunter Rugby Union officials have given the OK as well. However, all matches, with the exception of the Southern Beaches game, have been relocated. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
It's much needed comic relief as dozens of people work on salvaging the Pasha Bolka. This clever animation has been emailed across the world, and this morning it won a viewer competition on the Today Show. The brains behind the computer animation is 20-year-old Paul Robinson from Cundletown near Taree.
It's just sort of a way to make it a bit seem not as serious as it is, which it obviously could be stuck there for a while, and I just thought it'd give me an option for getting rid of it.
Paul suffers the debilitating Crohn's disease, which has stopped him from completing a Bachelor of Information Technology degree at the University of Newcastle. Instead, he's confined to his home near Taree, but that's given him time to hone his skills, and it's certainly paying off. It took just one afternoon for Paul to complete the animation.
Just do 3D graphics and compositing of images and stuff like that, which I spent probably 4 or 5 hours doing. And then just put it together in one afternoon, really. It's sort of a bit of a rush job for me.
Within the short animation, the Pasha becomes a transformer and marches off the beach. Many are now wishing if only it was that easy. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.